Town of Los Gatos Council meeting, and it says we're also the Joint Town Council Parking Authority Redevelopment Agency. That's the name of the actual meeting, but it's the Town Council meeting, as we all know. I'd like to ask everyone, please, to turn your cell phones onto vibrate or silent before we proceed, so we don't have any unnecessary interruptions. And I'll turn to our clerk administrator and ask for the roll.
Councilmember Barbara Spector.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Krasinski.
Here.
Vice Mayor Diane McNutt.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Mike Westerman.
Here. I'd now like to call Ari Schreiman to the front podium to join me, if you would, please. Good evening, Ari.
Good evening.
Ari is an 8-year-old boy. Ari's an 8-year-old. There we go. He's in 4th grade at Lexington Elementary School in Los Gatos. Ari has 2 younger sisters named Lena and Mika, and a pet snake, which I love, not the snake, but the name, named Slinky. Ari's interests include learning about nature, particularly animals, math, and science. He also enjoys gymnastics and swimming. The library is one of Ari's favorite places. He goes to the Los Gatos Library weekly with his mom and sisters. While there, you will usually find Ari in the non-fiction animals section, where he is reading about various animals. Last month, he completed a school project where he researched environmental impacts on the rainforest. The librarian, Heidi Long, was very helpful with finding a number of the rainforest books necessary for completing Ari's research paper. Ari also enjoys reading fiction books, mainly fantasy. He is currently reading the last book from the Lightning Thief series, named The Battle of the Labyrinth. Ari appreciates all of the great materials and programs that the Los Gatos Library has to offer. Ari is one of our future leaders, I'm sure, and see, he's certain of it as well, and he's now going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. You'll all stand, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Let's hear it for Ari. And Ari, for your being here tonight and leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance, we have a little gift here for you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. It's a privilege meeting you, and please give your best to each of our staff and council members here. When's Obama's term up? In about 8 years? All right, very nice. Thank you very much, Ari. Next on our agenda will be the closed session report, but we didn't have a closed session meeting today, so there is no closed session report. Now I would like to remind everyone, I don't have a sample here, but in front of each of you is a beige or brown card. If you want to speak on something tonight that's not on tonight's agenda, I'd like you please to fill out the little beige card that's in front of you. There's also a pencil tucked down in there as well. And please give it to our clerk administrator over here to my left. Well, that was quick. Okay. Send that on. Oops. Hello? There we are. Okay, we are already at agenda item number 1, and I'd like to ask Councilmember Barbara Spector, Clerk Administrator Jackie Rose, and Councilmember-elect, am I off one? We need that before we read them up there to do that. All right. Well, you all know it's coming. All right, first we need our Clerk Administrator to, I believe, certify the election results.
I think we just need a motion, Mayor.
I'm going to move to certify the election results.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries unanimously. Okay, I don't have that still on mine. So now, we are agenda item number 1. It was a dry run. Now I'd like to ask Councilmember Barbara Spector, Clerk Administrator Jackie Rose, and Councilmember-elect Steve Rice to join me at the ceremonial podium below. Our Clerk Administrator Jackie Rose will now certify the results and swear in our re-elected and newly elected council members.
Sure. Okay, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your names.
I, Steve Rice,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the State of California,
and the State of California,
that I will take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
I do hereby hereby proclaim that Barbara Spector and Steve Rice are officially installed to the position of council member of the town of Los Gatos.
Thank you, and I think you can hear me all right. I have a certificate of election here. It says this is to certify that Steve Wright has been elected to the office of council member of the town of Los Gatos on December 15, 2008, at a general municipal election duly held in the county of Santa Clara, state of California, signed by Jackie Rose. Steve, congratulations and welcome.
Thank you.
And I have the same for our former mayor and newly re-elected council member Barbara Rice. Barbara Spector, ladies and gentlemen. Take your seats.
All right.
I warned everybody back on November 17th it's going to be a different year. We're going to have a lot of fun, get together, get things done. Okay, now I would like to return to our clerk administrator and ask that she take the roll once again.
Councilmember Steve Rice.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Pazinski.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Spector. Here. Vice Mayor Diane McKnight. Still here. And Mayor and Chair Mike Wasserman.
Here. What I'd now like to do is look to our newly sworn-in council members and ask if they'd like to say a few words to the public this evening. We'll start with Barbara Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to thank all of you who supported me either by voting for me, contributing to my election, or endorsing me. But I want to give a special nod this evening to the people who did the work, to the people who joined me over a 2-month time frame to knock on 4,500 doors, reaching 9,000 voters, to the folks who sat around my dining room table for days or maybe weeks stuffing 3,500 envelopes, which reached 7,000 voters. And as a result of those efforts, and I see some of you in the audience, as a result of those efforts, the amount of money the campaign raised exceeded the amount we expended, and as a result, the campaign sometime early in 2009 will be making a contribution to some organization in the town of Los Gatos. And so for all of you who worked with me, thank you. We did a real win-win.
Thank you, Councilmember Spector. Now I turn to Councilmember Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, first I want to thank the voters of Los Gatos who had the guts to put me up here, I guess. I am truly honored to be a part of this group with tremendous experience and a track record that is second to none in this valley, and maybe in the state of California. I also want to thank those that supported me. Many of them are here today, and most important, my family, and my wife Linda, who is firmly convinced that there's a streak of masochism that runs down my back, but it's hidden by my shirt. I am very much looking forward to the next 4 years. The town has obvious challenges, as I'm sure you've read, with budget issues and the like, but we have tremendous opportunities. Tonight we're going to talk about a new library. Next week we talk about a new police administration building or operations building. The Los Gatos Boulevard is a challenge and an opportunity, and so is the North 40. We've got lots to do, and I'm very much looking forward to it, and I thank you for putting me here.
Okay, next on our agenda is presentations, but we don't have any presentations. The one that we had scheduled was postponed, so we'll now proceed to council and town manager reports. And I have a council matter item that I want to discuss, but I want to look to my council first for any that they may wish to bring up. Okay. We're moving right along here. Okay, third and final time. We're now going to head down to the podium and bring forth the final council matter of the evening, first and final. On behalf of the council, I would like to recognize and thank our former town treasurer and town clerk for their years of service to the town. I'd now like to ask Linda Spiker and Marion Cosgrove to come and join me at this podium. Hello, hello. Welcome, ladies. With us here tonight is Linda Spiker. Linda has served as the town treasurer for the past 8 years. Prior to being elected as town treasurer, Linda was also a council member for 6 years and served as mayor in 1997 and 1998. 8 years. 8 years on the council. And served as mayor in 1997 and 1998. Thank you for those 2 additional years. Now, on behalf of the town of Los Gatos, I'd like to present you with this town tile. This town tile reads, from the town of Los Gatos, Linda Lubeck Spiker, town treasurer, 2000 to 2008. So we got that right. All right. In recognition of your years of service to the town of Los Gatos. Thank you very much.
This is nice. It's just my end of my term as an elected treasurer. Last I heard, I was still hired to do the job, and I intend to continue doing the job, assuming the town continues to pay me, because I enjoy it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's hear it for Linda. And to my left, we have Marion Cosgrove. Marion has served the community as the town clerk for the last 20 years. Marion is an active community member and school volunteer. Marion, on behalf of the town of Los Gatos, I'd like to present you with a ceremonial tile as well. This reads Marion V. Cosgrove, Town Clerk, 1988 to 2008, in recognition of your years of service to the town of Los Gatos. Take a few minutes.
I prepared 3 minutes, because that's usually what you get. So, as the elected town clerk of Los Gatos for the last 20 years, chosen by 68% of the voters to fulfill the full-time job of town clerk, which the town contracted with the state to recognize, I'm very honored to be recognized this evening by council. As a citizen and resident of Los Gatos, I have served my community as directed by the state of California under the Direction for General Law Cities and their incorporation certificate with the state. The office of town clerk, the position, and all it encompasses, allowed for this clerk to hold the position for the people for the past 20 years, and to work a full 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, or 20-hour day, depending on the nature of the needs of the town. Fire, earthquake, and Highway 85 took their toll of time, commitment, and resources. The Office of Town Clerk also defended the Open and Public Records Act of California, an act that was meant to keep the legislative action of government transparent. Government uses the word transparent nowadays as if it was a badge to wear on its sleeve. But you cannot make a record transparent if it's buried in a department's drawer, a manager's files, around file under the desk. The government code is not open and free to all if the government hides behind a title and does not reveal where the answers to the questions can be found. Government works for itself. It represents 40% of the jobs in America, and it protects itself, as Joe the plumber found out. I'm proud to have helped all who came looking for their permits, their trust deeds, their trust accounts, their bonds, their deposits, and their letters of credit. And I also took pride in helping constituents find information as to how to navigate through the chaotic and unfriendly process, sometimes called government. The Office of the Town Clerk located and delivered the so-called transparent documents that no one else could remember seeing. This office did not cause any personal drama, but was proud to protect our governing body and its officers. Until every past, present, and future document is freely accessible to the public on the town's website, we are not transparent. The town should also fully show the breakdown of all town duties, jobs, and itemize the hourly commitment and cost of those duties. The Office of Town Clerk did just that in several annual budgets. It was a request from the town manager, and this office followed it. No other office complied, and our reports were then dropped from the budget after 3 years so that the budget would look more consistent. Again, I am honored to have fulfilled my duties to the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you, Linda. We'll now turn to our town manager, Greg Larson, for any manager matters.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, just a brief one. I had the good fortune, as all of you and so many residents of Los Gatos and the broader community, to attend the holiday tree lighting and holiday children's parade, the first on Friday night and the parade on Saturday. This was my first time as a member of this community to attend those events, and I was overwhelmed. What magnificent accomplishments for this community to have that long history and tradition of providing those wonderful services. I did want to speak to some of the unsung heroes of that night and the day, in that the town staff provided nearly 700 hours of labor, half of it volunteer, to pull off the holiday tree lighting and the holiday parade. And I just wanted here tonight to share with you my congratulations and thanks to all the staff and volunteers who went above and beyond the call of duty to make those events such a success, in particular from Parks and Public Works and the Police Department. So many thanks to them.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. On behalf of the council, please give our thanks to them as well. It certainly takes a community to put on a parade like that. Absolutely. We'll now turn to verbal communications. Again, these are the cards that I was referring to. For anyone that wishes to speak, please fill one out, hand it over here to our clerk administrator. I have a card from Steve Leonardis.
Good evening, this is Steve Leonardis from 136 Terrace Street Away. I just want to say I'm excited about the new era of government, looking forward to the next several years, and very optimistic. And, I've been attending the meetings here for the last couple of years, been watching them online as well, and I've seen a lot of comments from the public audience, variations of council members' names and salutes and, employees sitting up here who are being attacked verbally, and even some projects that we're going through, the Planning Commission individual's name or issues being personalized. And I was just going to say, we do have freedom of speech, of course, in the United States, and it's a wonderful thing, but I want to challenge the public going forward from this point to, be more congenial, I guess is the word. I think the points will be better made, and the voices will be heard stronger if the issues aren't personalized, and if all of our volunteers in the community aren't beat up. Even though I know it's one of those things that sometimes people view as their right, I just don't think it's necessary to get one's point across in a public forum like this. So that's all I wanted to say, and thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you. Mr. Ray Davis?
Say Citizen Ray.
Fine, Citizen Ray. Citizen Ray.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, Mr. Spector. No, that isn't right. Excuse me. Okay? Let's start off right, with Ms. Spector retired from office. And now we have you, Mr. Wasserman. No mistake, okay? First off, I want to comment on the marvelous occurrence that I saw here in these chambers just 1 week ago. When that little 6-year-old Ritz girl came up here, the girl that had that terrible accident when her hand and fingers were torn off. And she almost died until a passing motorist took his belt off his pants and put a tourniquet on her arm and saved her life. Just a month and a half ago, this little girl was right there, just hopping and bopping around. She had her hand up, her damaged hand. You could see where the marvelous men at Stanford had put it back together again. She didn't even favor it, hardly at all. She just didn't want to hit anything with it. And I took a look at her hand, and those fingers were beautiful. 4 little fingers that were laying on the street were put together by those medical people at Stanford, and her hand is in beautiful shape, okay? And far more than that, she stands up there with her mom and leads the Pledge of Allegiance. I got to tell you, that's not a future leader, that's a leader right now, okay? That little 6-year-old girl showed what it takes to be an American, a real American, as opposed to some of the less Americanized people we saw in the last election, okay, where hate mail became the norm from one of them. So, hats off to the Ricks. I don't know her name, but wonderful, wonderful occurrence, okay. Number 2, this man Glickman that was here for 8 years had his last say, okay. And he sat up there and he self-aggrandized himself till we couldn't stand, I couldn't stand it anymore, hardly at all. But the payoff for me was to see him out in the lobby when the meeting was over. There wasn't one person there to thank him and say goodbye to him. Not one, other than his wife and the Glickmanistas.
Thank you, Citizen Ray.
Dallas couple, Peggy Dallas.
Your time is up.
Of course.
Move along, Ray.
Of course. Moving on. Thank you.
Okay. I have no other cards, so I'm now going to close the verbal communications portion of this evening. And before proceeding to the next item on the agenda, as most of you, I'm sure, are aware, a Los Gatos High School senior passed away last Monday. His name's Mikey Halpin, and I think it appropriate that we just take a moment here as a moment of silence, if you will. I was fortunate enough to be at the Los Gatos High School Palo Alto football game on Saturday, and that team came out there with the flags of 52 and played that game in honor of Mikey, and they brought the CCS championship home to Los Gatos. And when they took that championship team photo, they brought his family into the photo and that flag so that Mikey could be there with all of them. So if I can ask your indulgence now for just a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Now, before proceeding to other business, which is the conceptual design of our new library, we're going to take a 5-minute break right now, and right in 5 minutes we're going to start up again. This will allow our architects time to set up their presentation and their display. So we'll start this up again in just 5 minutes. Everybody, please take a seat if you want to stay here and listen. If you don't, see ya. Okay, we're now on to item number 2, which is the conceptual design of our new library. We'll start with a staff report from Pamela Jacobs, our Assistant Town Manager.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the Council. We came to you last on November 3rd when we talked about the site plan for the new library and received direction from you to proceed with planning the library at the location adjacent to the hill on the southeast corner of the Civic Center site. After that, we held a community meeting at which we received community input on features they would like to see in the new library. And following that, we held a design charrette to discuss the priorities for sustainable elements in the new library. As you know, that we are targeting to achieve LEED Silver certification with our new library. And we are here tonight to share with you some of the features regarding the site plan and the design of the interior and exterior of the building. And with that input that we received tonight, the architects will develop a final conceptual plan, which we will share with you in early January. And at that time, that will launch the environmental review and land use process for the new library. The other item on your agenda tonight with regard to the library is to authorize the execution of a First Amendment with Nolan Tam, extending the term of their agreement to June 30th, 2009 at no additional cost to the town. And with that, I'm going to introduce and turn it over to Chris Knoll of Nolan Tam Architects, who are our architects on this project.
Thank you very much. Very glad to be here again in front of you tonight. We have done some work since we last met with you on November 13th on the site plan and the design of the building.
Thank you, Mr. Knoll. If you can just raise that microphone up a little bit right there to help our TV audience. Thank you.
And we're here tonight to try to see if we could get some feedback from you about some of our preliminary ideas about the design of the building and the somewhat more developed site plan. So with that, I'd like to start with our site plan, and you have seen this at the last meeting. What we did was presented to you a couple of options, and you selected the option to locate the building back against the hillside at the back of the site. And we have developed this option somewhat with the plan that you have before you here tonight. First of all, we have created a strong pedestrian link from East Main Street all the way back through the site, past the entrance to the Civic Center and the library to Pageant Park. That was sort of one of the features that we wanted to make quite strongly. We have also tried in this plan to preserve all of the major trees on the site. Not only the trees at the front here, but there's a large oak back here, a large spruce here, and other trees scattered around. The ones in this green color are all mature trees, and we took special pains to make sure that we kept as many of those as we could. We have integrated the existing roadway, which is now coming in from here, as well as the parking areas in this part in front of the neighborhood center, partly to sort of utilize them as much as we could and to sort of keep our site costs down so that we could use them on other parts of the site. So this is sort of partly a cost-saving measure, and also, not to sort of have to replace something that is already functioning fairly well. We have a circulation through the site now as you come in here that would lead you through all the way back here to Villa Avenue. So Fiesta Way now becomes an entrance to the parking lot of the Civic Center rather than being a street in its own regard, but you can get through, and it will sort of slow the traffic down and still allow you to get through. There's additional parking that's being provided on the site over here where there are two small houses that will be removed. The library itself is located right here with more parking in this location. Within the parking lot itself, we have bioswales, which is a way to sort of capture and filter rainwater and before it goes back into the system and discharged into the stormwater system. We have a drop-off area here in front of the library, so you'll be able to come in and have a drop-off area so that parents can drop the children off and pick people up, as well as very, very short-term parking so that you can run in and drop books off. We have plazas that connect the existing Civic Center here to a plaza in front of the library. There's a strong connection between those two that also ties in to this passageway leading back to Pageant Park here, which we've accented with some trees that are newly planted trees and specialty paving to make this a very nice sort of alley all the way back to the site and get you to this entrance and to this entrance. We have bike parking here in front of the library. The plaza in front of the library here, the library is raised up a couple of feet, so we will have some raised walkways on either side, and as well as a set of stairs at the front. And you'll sort of see this in the illustrations that we'll show a little bit later on. This is the front door of the library right there, and so it sort of faces the street. You can see it as you come in, and you can see it and makes the connection over here to the Civic Center. There's bicycle parking located right here. We're still working on where the dog parking goes. The service and delivery access for the library happens over here. There's not a huge amount of service and delivery, but there is enough that we'd like to sort of have it over there. And the staff entrance would also be at that location, so the staff can enter the library and leave it from their own doorway. There's going to be some outdoor group areas at the back of the library here, as well as over here in the children's area. And the existing winery walls back here will be preserved. We brought the building forward a few feet. This is the reason we've done this is because it will sort of save us some site costs by not having to actually take one retaining wall out and build another one in its place. By keeping the building in front of that retaining wall, we can sort of focus our budget on building as much library as we can. And I think, again, in the entry plaza here, we would have a lot of sort of specialty paving and make this a very sort of lovely turnaround here around that really large and beautiful oak tree. So it's going to be quite a lovely feature. There are a lot of trees in front, but you will be able to see the library. We're sort of hoping for some nice diagonal views through here, as well as a view down this access here. So the library will be, even though it's way at the back of the site, we're sort of hoping and sort of doing the landscape planning so that it will be quite visible. So tonight we're seeking council feedback on the general features of the site plan in order to sort of help us continue with this design and to develop it. So it's important to note at this point in time that additional detail is going to be provided. This is still very much of a conceptual design. We still have to work with the fire department to sort of talk about how they need to access the site. We need to sort of complete the tree conditions and make sure that all the large trees that we're preserving still have a good amount of lifespan into them. And there are possibly issues with topography that we're going to need to deal with that might make minor changes to the site plan. But we don't expect there to be any major changes after this unless you wish to. This gives you an idea of what the building is like at the back of the hillside. Right now, these are the existing retaining walls here. We have brought the building out from that so that we can have on the main floor of the library here, have an outdoor seating area in that sort of recessed area. So the first floor of the library, the second floor of the library. You can see, how we're bringing the central portion of the library up in the middle here to bring light into the middle.
Excuse me one second, Mr. Miller. Just wanted to ask the two ladies in the back, can you hear? You can. Okay, thank you.
So the construction of the new library is going to change the status of Fiesta Way, as I explained, to be a through street, from a through street into an entrance to the Civic Center. And even though you still can travel through, it is going to affect this and might affect the residents in the adjoining neighborhood. So one of the things that the staff is going to do is to have a meeting to discuss the impacts on that with the neighborhood and make sure that everybody's consulted about that. In regard to parking, the traffic report that was made for the Civic Center master plan had a lot of complicated calculations about how much parking to provide on the site. But the basic conclusion of that was that the existing amount of parking on the site needed to be increased by one space when the library was done. And we've done a careful study of the parking layout on the whole site right now, taking into account the existing parking in the front here, the new parking we're creating over here, the changes to the parking behind the Civic Center there, and other parking on the street and around this side here. And we are now within 4 spaces of the existing. We're just short a few spaces, but we think this is a work in progress. We are going to continue to look for opportunities for adding parking places here and there. The fire department review is going to have some effect upon this, and as we continue to develop the site plan, we're going to keep pushing to get as much parking onto the site as possible to sort of meet that goal and possibly achieve it. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the council to give us some feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Knoll. I appreciate that. And we'll start with council questions of Mr. Knoll. Okay. I'm just trying to, I think what we'll do is we'll have you finish your presentation, go all the way through it, before we turn to the public for questions, and then we'll close the public portion, and we'll come back to council, and then we'll work on that. Are you ready to proceed?
Mr. Mayor?
Absolutely.
If I could ask a question?
Yes, Mr. Brzezinski.
Mr. Knoll, you talked about the parking, the slight parking deficiency as currently envisioned. What is the intention in the plan of the driveway that currently is at the rear of the police building? Is there any intention to use that for staff purposes, to keep that as a through parking access? What is the intention?
No, because of where the library is located so close to the Civic Center, it won't be possible to have that being a through passageway. It does need to be shut off. But the existing parking that's back there can be retained. They'll just have to sort of turn around and go back out the same way. It's just there's not enough room here to be able to bring it out, and we're also trying to emphasize the pedestrian connections through there, and I think it would be a real conflict to do that.
Yeah, I wasn't intending to recommend it.
Yeah.
I appreciate the fact that it's now an isolated use, but in terms of the parking counts, some of that is predicated on the number of staff they're going to have to park, not just the customers to the library or the Civic Center. And I would recommend that you do some further look into that space behind the police station to see how it can be better utilized for the purpose of staff parking when you look to finalizing the plan.
We have discussed that with staff, and that will be part of our continuing sort of development of the design, is to maximize the use of the parking behind the Civic Center, and also to find good solutions for staff parking and basically make the visitor parking as accessible as possible and sort of give preferred treatment to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knoll. Mr. Brzezinski, Ms. Jacobs, did you have something to add?
No, council member.
Thank you. Vice Mayor McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Knoll, I wanted to reemphasize a couple of the points that you made about traffic flow and how it's going to impact the normal habits of people who are using Fiesta and Villa, either to access their homes or as cut-through to avoid traffic. So can you show us with your handy-dandy laser there, as you come up off of Main Street, the access to the parking in front of the neighborhood center would be there, okay? And is that also the only access point then to the parking up that way? Okay? And then it would go on up to access the additional parking or to go off onto Villa. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when the subcommittee met, we were just concerned about that and making sure that we think through as a community that everyone's aware of this and they're going to be okay with it, and that's why staff is recommending having a community meeting coming up. But there's quite a bit of traffic. I don't think we've done a traffic count in that area for quite a while. So we just have to be really sensitive, I think, because we're going to be interrupting long-standing traffic patterns for a whole lot of people.
Thank you. Mr. Rice.
I was actually going to build on that a little bit of what Vice Mayor McNutt was talking about, and I'm looking at it and seeing 5 different turning movements to get to that back parking lot, which seems a little ungainly, and I realize I wasn't on the subcommittee or anything. I don't know, did we look at the possibility of reversing flow in the neighborhood center lot, which would give you a straight shot up? You go straight right into the existing parking lots, and it would cut down the number of turning movements. Was that looked at all? Is that feasible?
We did look at that. We looked at quite a few options about how we might lay this out. It's a particularly difficult problem to get parking on this site because of the mature trees and having to maneuver around them. It really limits what we can do. The dimension in this direction does not lend itself to having the parking work very well. And so this entrance here, being the main entrance, it didn't work out very well. We tried it, and we didn't like it very much. It is still possible. It might be something we could look at, some more, but it wasn't something that we continued with. And we came back to this configuration, which has the added benefit of preserving kind of this part of the whole site more or less unchanged, which really helps us a lot in terms of our budget. So, but it wasn't a budget-driven decision altogether. It was sort of functional. We couldn't improve the number of parking spaces very much at all by reconfiguring everything. Unless we clear-cut all the trees out of here, then we would be able to make some big improvements. But we did not figure that was a viable alternative.
Okay, thank you. I think Vice Mayor McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one other point. I just wanted to also clarify that what I think, and maybe staff should actually clarify this, but I think what staff is looking at is really in assigning or encouraging employee parking to be on the outer perimeters of the Civic Center, so that that whole central section where we all parked to come here tonight, I would imagine, would be staff-free and totally available for visitors. So by putting employees over in what's now currently the library parking on the west side of the site, behind the existing Civic Center, in that far upper left lot and so on, it's going to cut down, I think, on the number of people that have to make all of those turns to get to that tucked-away parking. Staff wanted, okay.
Yes? No? Okay. Mr. Knoll, unless you have a comment in response to what was just said, why don't we continue with the second part of your presentation?
Okay, thank you. So now what we'd like to do is talk about some of our preliminary ideas about the design of the building. I can't see my notes here. I need some light. Yes.
Mr. Knoll, if you want, that microphone in front of you is cordless. You can pull it out of there if you want to move closer to the screen, if there's more light there for your notes.
Let me give that.
You are portable.
I'll give that a try.
There you go.
So we started the idea of our building. We like to sort of have something that really sort of is a key governing concept for our building, for any of our architectural projects. And we came up with the idea of the library being a lantern. A library is in many ways connected to the idea of light. It's sort of the light of knowledge, bringing a book to the light, and it's all about sort of illumination in many ways. And so we sort of saw the library as a lantern, something that encloses a light and protects it from weather. It's an open structure, very light material. It is illuminated at night and sort of glows and provides a beacon for people. And during the daytime, the light from the outside comes in and illuminates it. And that is sort of one of the guiding principles that we have. We have a number of other sort of design features that we want to sort of keep coming back to as we design the library, to make sure that what we're doing kind of is right for this town and really meets your needs. First and foremost, that it will be a building that is warm and inviting. This is not about style, it's about materials, it's about proportions, colors. It is someplace, it is about sort of the way you enter the building. We want this to be a building that appeals to people, that makes them feel welcome, that this is their library, a place that they come into and feel wonderful and comfortable being in. It is a building that works with the existing Civic Center but doesn't mimic it. Because of sort of the geography of this area, the only building that really kind of the library kind of can be seen in context with is the Civic Center and the Neighborhood Center, and both of those are sort of modern brick structures. What we want to do is to sort of make a comfortable fit with those two buildings, but not to look like them. It is a building that's going to respond to nature and incorporate natural materials. This is, we've sort of felt from our conversations with people in Los Gatos that sort of living close to nature here is something that's important to you. So the materials on the outside of the building, the materials on the inside of the building, and the forms of the building itself is going to be something that feels very natural. It is going to be a building that has grand spaces, but we want people to feel comfortable within them. So even though you might have a large open space, and that is sort of something, a functional necessity in the library, it's going to have sort of human-scaled and intimate features within it, so you don't feel overwhelmed by the scale of that space. It's going to be a building that both looks outward and allows people to look inward. That sort of goes back to the lantern concept, where it's going to be a transparent building, particularly on the north side facing Main Street, where if you're outside the building, you'll be able to look in and see people having activities in the library and using it. And also, when you're inside, you'll be able to look out at the back side, the south side, toward the hillside, into sort of nature, and into the front, into that beautiful lawn area out toward Main Street and the beautiful mature trees that are there. And it's going to have features in the building that sort of promote the idea of sustainability and use them to educate people. So not only will it be a sustainable building, but the features will be educational as well. We have some images here, and the purpose of showing you images, which are not illustrations of the library, but illustrations of other buildings, some of which are libraries and some of which are other types of buildings, is to kind of give you an idea of the kind of sort of references that we have, and to get your feedback on whether you like them, you hate them, but it's sort of to hear from you about whether these are appropriate or inappropriate images. But for us, these are the kind of images that we are using for inspiration as we go through this. These all show large spaces. The library, particularly the upper floor of the library, is going to be a big, large open space. But within that space, we're going to have seating for people. It's going to have sort of warmth of materials and light. It's going to feel human-scaled, and it's not going to be overpowering. So we want to sort of assure you that that is a real feature of us, is to have this big space, because it is celebratory, it is grand, and it is sort of a great space of the town. But also within that, you're going to be comfortable. Also, it's going to allow you to look out of the building and bring a lot of natural light in. So you can see how the light would flow down the stairwell in particular. This slide right here is probably very much like the stair that we're going to have going up in the center of the building, if you remember our floor plans from the previous council presentation, that has a stairwell that goes up in the double height space and brings that light all the way down through the center of the building to the ground floor. And it allows you to look out and see the views and see the hillside. At nighttime, the building is going to light up. And so these sort of show different ways that can happen, with sort of light coming through filters, different shape of the building, with being able to see into it and see what's going on, and then using that expressive nature of the light coming through to kind of express the sort of an interesting facade of the building and the transparency of it. We also are going to need to have sustainability features on the building. Particularly on the south side, we have a lot of natural light coming in there. We're going to need to filter that light. And one of the ways to do that is through louvers, whether they're horizontal louvers or vertical louvers. What we want to do is to make them not feel sort of industrial, but to make them feel sort of human. And so some of these are made out of wood, some are made out of metal, and then other materials on the building would be sort of natural. So we might have terracotta panels, or concrete sort of open space units like that. But basically sort of giving you an idea of sort of filtering the light and bringing that human scale to it. There are other things that can be incorporated into the facade. These are photovoltaic panels over here that are incorporated into the facade of the building. These are incorporated into skylights, and we might sort of that is one of the things that we were talking about, of having sort of an educational part of the building where you'd be able to actually see the building at work and its sustainable features. And there are lots of materials that we can make this building out of, and we are always looking for sort of natural materials and sort of materials that sort of feel good and feel handmade. This is about sort of the idea of expressed structure. We'd like the structure not to be hidden away behind walls, but to actually bring it out. We do need an open space, and so we are going to have exposed columns, but we don't want to just have steel I-beams that are sitting out there. We want to do something fun. So these express both steel in these two photographs that are put together in interesting ways that sort of taper and are pieces that are bundled together, or wood structure that sort of resembles trees, or trusses, more traditional forms like that, or a very sort of interesting modern form there in the upper right, sort of combinations of wood and steel. Having wood ceilings in the building that are sort of spaced wood ceilings that are very good acoustically and give you sort of a warm touch to it. So letting that structure kind of come through and be very grand in the space, but also sort of have some real features to it. And then at nighttime, when the building glows, there's the opportunity to add color. In particular, the children's area and the teens area are areas we want to feature in the library. And we might be able to do that with some interesting lighting systems that sort of glow and make something really special out of it and kind of fun. And we want to have fun with the building. We want it to feel, both quiet and elegant, but also, lively, because this will be a real sort of center of your activities. And so those are some of our design inspirations, and now I think what I'd like to do is sort of go through some ideas about the sort of more specific designs, and then sort of turn it over to you for some questions. So these are sort of more like massing studies to give you an idea of what's going on here. We have 5 schemes to show you, and they're all sort of slightly different, and I'll sort of spend more time on the first one to kind of orient you. This is looking from the parking lot. This is the main entrance facade of the building that faces north. This is the east elevation over here. As you can see, we have the whole upper floor very, very transparent. It faces north. We don't need much shading on it. It's a good way to bring natural light into the building. And we're sort of seeing that whole upper facade being very glassy. And the lower facade would be more solid. And it's sort of a counterpoint of the solid base and the more transparent type. Over on the right-hand side is the children's area that would be somewhat more transparent, so that would bring light into the children's area and also allow you to see in. The main entrance was there in the center with a canopy over it, possibly with great signage above it. And then over here is the teen area has a little pop-out to sort of give it a nice feature, so it's kind of exciting, and you'd see the people working within that. The staff area is down here, somewhat more closed in behind windows, and that's more of a solid wall. The north side is very open because we don't need to shade it, but the east elevation here and also the west elevation even more so is going to need to have fewer openings and shaded openings, so because it gets very intense light. The early morning light, but particularly the late afternoon light, can really overheat a building. And this is going to be a very energy efficient building, and one of the things we have to do is really control the exposure. On the south side, there'll be a lot of louvers, and we'll sort of see that in the next illustration, or the third illustration, I think. The second the second option that we have basically looks at not having the entire upper floor transparent, but looking possibly at more of a solid expression over there. And this is just sort of trying out different sort of yins and yangs on the design of the building and letting it be less symmetrical than the other one. The third one sort of decorates or sort of modulates the facade with a set of louvers. These will help us sort of bring light into the building by bouncing it deep into the building. This is what I was talking about on the south side is probably going to be more like this, because we really do need to very tightly control the amount of light that comes into the building. It's light is a good thing, but it also can overheat our building, and we want to make sure we don't have to have very large air conditioning systems to deal with it. So the south side would look a lot like this. These might be further apart on the north facade to let more light in, but that's an expression with louvers. This is a slightly different version where instead of but it's much more flat. It doesn't have the projection where the teen area is, and it gives you, from a slightly different perspective, a little more illustration of what those east and the west facades might be like with the punched openings in these solid walls. And these walls, the kind of materials we're talking about here, and we'll turn the lights on in a minute and show you, are probably, hopefully natural materials like stone, possibly. There are lots of different kinds of stone. It could be brick, it could be terracotta panels. They might be small modules like bricks, but they might be larger modules that come in sort of larger patterns. They could be stacked bonds, or they could be running bonds. And there are lots of different ways that we can put the materials together to show, have a really interesting and rich experience with our materials, and having coursing that goes through it. So part of our studies, design studies, are going to be getting into the detail of how those materials are placed and how they go together and what the patterns are. And then the last option is much more solid than these others, and it was, again, just a pass. So what if we didn't have quite so much glass on this facade? Glass is expensive, and if we get into a budget crunch, we might need to cut back on some of our glass. But this was a way of looking at more solid and having more punched openings in those large reading rooms. These are one big, large reading room up on the top floor here, for the most part. Down below, it's broken into smaller spaces, but they all have a lot in common. And, I forgot to talk about, on the first slide, the cats of Los Gatos. You might have a new set of cats that we might bring to sort of announce the entrance to the library. So I think that is, we might turn the lights on now and talk a little bit about the materials. And again, this is sort of a smorgasbord of possibilities that we might use for the building, ranging from some of the exterior materials where we have a number of stone samples, natural stone samples here. There are also some manufactured stone, which come in. They're much less expensive than that, but they come in very nice ways of colors and features.
Try that again, Mr. Knoll. If I could ask if you can try to do this from either side, and that way the people here as well as us can see what you've got going.
Okay. So, natural stone materials are here. These are terracotta materials. There's some really sort of wonderful fired materials that give some variation, but they have a very sort of earth tone natural feature to it. This is a particularly nice Italian product, and these can be placed in sort of expensive and less expensive ways on the building. But they come in different textures and different colors, and there are lots of interesting bits and pieces that come in sizes, so you can mix large pieces and skinny pieces and really pattern a facade. This is a wood ceiling material, something that you could put on the ceilings in there to give you kind of the feeling of a ceiling in a nice wood, but also allows the acoustical properties to be very high performance. Inside the building, we've got cork, could be on the walls or on the floors. These are a series of interesting sort of resin materials where you can use them for partitions and other things that incorporate, really nice patterns and natural materials in them, like grasses and flowers and leaves and things that make a really kind of interesting thing. And that's sort of the idea of bringing nature into the building. One of the main things are the window systems in the building. It is kind of natural to have aluminum window systems, and kind of what we're talking about. It sort of fits our budget. It is a high-performance material, and we would probably paint it. So on top of that natural aluminum sample, if we didn't want to go with the sort of the metal color of the building, which might not be the right thing in this context, we could paint that any number of different colors, both standard colors as well as custom colors, to get just the right look to it. So it doesn't feel like an industrial building. I think one of the things we try to keep away from is feeling too sort of steely and industrial. A lot of possibilities of using wood in the building, lots of dark woods, light woods, and also sort of alternative composite materials. We have bamboo. This is kind of a grassy wheat board. We can make panels and partitions and end panels on the bookshelves. Other sustainable features, this is a paper product that's sort of compressed into paper and colored. You can use that for tabletops, wall panels, and other things. Some more sort of bright colors would like this, not just to sort of be plain. We'd like to bring some bright colors in. This is 3-form. It's a resin material. It's kind of like the other stuff there that can be done in very bright colors. And then we'll sort of introduce some really interesting honeycomb materials and things like that. You can make panels again, tables and chairs, very lightweight and very sort of colorful and kind of fun. So the possibilities are very wide, and we're very early in the process. So we sort of wanted to give you an idea of the direction we were going, and basically turn it back over to you to hear what you have to say and what the vote does.
Thank you very much. I'll look to my counsel for questions, and we'll open it up to the public. If anyone wishes to speak regarding this issue, please fill out a card, submit it to the clerk, and if you're not already on our What's New, our web service, our email service, if you will, at the bottom of the card, please put your email address, and the town will periodically send emails out to you regarding special events and happenings in Los Gatos. Council, any questions of what you've seen before we hear from the public? Seeing none, I will now turn to the public. I don't have any cards. You went, okay, come on up and then hand your card in to the clerk, ma'am, when you're done. Please state your name and address for the record, and then turn in your card when you're finished.
My name is Stephanie Olson. I live at 20930 Panorama Heights, not in the town of Los Gatos, but I've been living here since I was 4. And I would like to ask Mr. Knoll there, are you planning on...
I'm sorry, ma'am, I need you to direct your questions to council.
Oh, okay.
And then we can turn around, and it's just the way the system
Okay, I would like to ask about radiant heating, if that is going to be a possibility, because it's a very warm type of heating. And also, are the louvers, it looked like from the sketches that they might be exterior. Could they also possibly be interior?
Thank you very much. We'll take your question. We'll answer it in a moment. Citizen Ray?
Well, I understand it's feedback time, according to the architect. I got to tell you, I look at those renderings there. I can't believe this man has even attempted to capture the spirit of Los Gatos in his architecture. Square, boxy, commercial looking. Looks like something that, that would fit into Santana Row beautifully. What's it got to do with the heart and soul of Los Gatos? We have these marvelous antique buildings 1 block away, and then we show up potentially with this. Unbelievable. We need to get this man to think Los Gatos or find a new architect. Now, he's the second architect. The first one had the same problem, you remember. She couldn't figure out what Los Gatos was all about. I don't think this guy has either. So that's just to start with, all right? One of the things that really disturbs me is that I walk around town and I talk to people. Nobody has ever mentioned that we needed a library. This is a $40 to $50 million project in a downturn economy, and it's being motivated by a group of 20 or 30 people at 2 meetings. I can't believe it. Have you gone out to the community to get their ideas and their feedback, or is it just the small group that's here tonight and the one that was here before that's going to empower a $50 million expenditure for the town of Los Gatos? It makes no sense, okay? Lastly, we had a meeting on the library just a month ago, I guess. I brought up the issue of the abominable parking lighting situation, which is very unsafe, particularly for women at night meetings, okay? Too many dark spaces out there, okay? This lighting system was obsolete 40 years ago. And this man says he's not going to do a thing about it. and he's going to put in new parking, and he hasn't even talked about public safety and appropriate lighting for the new parking. So when is he going to get the message? Okay? Public safety at night in public spaces demands proper modern lighting for the safety of the inhabitants of Los Gatos. People first, always. When will we get the message? I wonder.
Thank you, Citizen Ray.
You got it.
Do I have any other cards? Anyone else wishing to speak? Please come forward, sir, and give your name and address.
I'm J.D. Vanderlaan, 17830 Bruce Avenue, Los Gatos. I just had a question. I've been concerned about the parking, and no mention was made about the existing parking on the north side of the Civic Center. Is that going to be used for some other purpose? Or can employee parking be required over there to open up the parking in front of the building? And the second question I have really is there a vast difference in cost in these various 4 presentations? I'd like to know that.
Thank you. Rita Baum?
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Rita Baum, and I live at 135 El Pinar. Just a couple of comments. I am just so excited to hear that there will be lots of windows and lots of light, and that these windows will bring in all the beautiful trees that surround this area. I was pleased to see some of the materials, like the terracotta, which is warm, and the use of woods. So many of the new libraries that I have visited, to me, seem very cold, very commercial, filled with concrete pillars that are angular. So I'm just happy to hear about wanting to honor the environment, bringing in warmth, and I just hope that we continue to stress that. And I do have to admit that I agree with Citizen Ray that night lighting is very important, that it be adequate, that form follows function, and the function of lighting is to provide light and safety. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you. Lee Quintana?
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I just have a few comments and questions. My first question is that the site plan appears that will require the removal of the 2 buildings adjacent to the community center. One of those buildings, I believe, is a historic pre-1941 structure, and I wonder what the plans are in regards to that, whether it will be moved, retained, or is it planned to be demolished. Also, I'd like to reinforce that I think light and libraries, or successful libraries, are synonymous. Too often, older libraries are very dark, and I personally don't find them inviting. I know when I was a student at San Jose State, I used to go all the way over to Santa Cruz to their library because there was desks that were available looking out into the beautiful redwood forests and lots of light. The other thing, sustainability was mentioned, and in terms of discussion of the products, I think in terms of sustainability, it would be wonderful if we could focus on products that are as locally produced as possible, so that we're honoring, not wasting energy on transportation. And my last thing is just a personal thing, and that is to be able to read library materials on an outdoor patio, and also for the library to contain some enclosed small room that is a quiet reading area within the bigger space that is always available for people to read, not just if there's no community meeting going on or something of that sort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no one else, we'll close the public portion.
I do have one more comment to make.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I've lived in Los Gatos for almost 35 years, and I have always felt, even when I first moved here, that our library was insufficient to serve the community well. It's a very heavily used library, and I think we do need a new library. And I also, commenting on the architecture, while it is very modern, I don't think it would be appropriate to have a Victorian building built for a library because we do have this very modern civic center.
Thank you. Coming from a lady who lives in Victorian. Okay, we'll close the public portion now, and we're going to turn. I'd like to turn to staff and architects. Mr. Knoll, if you can come back up here with the microphone, and Mrs. Jacobs, Mr. Larson, whoever's appropriate here, answering a few questions. I'd like to directly respond to half a dozen questions that were brought up in just short answers, whatever is possible. For instance, when they talk about a quiet room, I know that we haven't got down to the interior designing, breaking up of the library itself. What we're looking at now is location, parking, flow, exterior colors. We're looking at the conceptual design of the library. You brought forth a lantern idea, a transparency where the public can look in, people can look out, and I know that you're looking for direction to move on to the next phase of design. So given all that, I'll turn to staff first to give a short answer to the removal of existing homes.
We are aware of the historic homes on the property, both historic homes and pre-1941 homes in general, and they will be going through the historic preservation process as part of the environmental review. It is likely that the one home in particular is historic, and our proposal will be to relocate the home, but we will be following the town's historic preservation policies and practices.
Thank you very much. Next one question was brought up was about cost difference. The architects have been specifically charged with building a library. I don't remember the exact dollar, between 18 and 19 million, that ties in with the RDA money that we have set aside over the years for the purpose of building this library. Based on surveys that have been taken, based on numerous meetings that have taken place, a library is the number one priority, the number one goal of this community. And I'm proud to say that this staff, this town, this council, commissions, etc., have all worked very, very hard to say we're going to have a new library. When the existing library was built in 1965, the population was 10,000 people. There's now 30,000 people living in Los Gatos using the same library that was designed for 10,000. So it's time for a new library. The library is used more than any other resource in this town by several times, if I were to ask Mrs. Conaway, but I'm not going to ask you that because we're going to keep moving along here. So to answer that question regarding the cost, there will be cost differences in design, as our architect has mentioned. Solid walls, glass costs more than solid. At the end of the day, we're going to bring forth a library design that fits the budget, that is as green-friendly as possible and fits in as well as possible. That's what they've been charged with, and that's what we'll end up accepting. Next question, please, had to do with the existing parking on the north side of the Civic Center. And I believe the exact question, and perhaps you're shaking your head, Mrs. Jacobs, you might remember the exact question had to do with use of that parking, perhaps staff or in some other way.
Yes, that's correct. We're looking at designating the parking on the perimeter of the Civic Center site. That would be to the east, to the west, both places, and behind the Civic Center for staff parking.
Thank you.
And optimizing the number
available.
of spaces there as well.
And that would make the most convenient parking then available to library patrons. Thank you. Next question, Mr. Knoll, had to do with the radiant heating. It was one of the energy ideas that I'm sure you're considering, radiant, solar, etc. Can you have a short response perhaps to the question raised about radiant heating being considered?
Radiant heating is a great system. It's particularly good in homes, and we did a library in Marina down near Monterey that has radiant heating. They also have a climate down there that never really requires air conditioning. What radiant heating doesn't do quite so well is air conditioning. So we are, at this point, we're considering a raised floor system, which brings the air in underneath the floor and then up through controlled vents in the floor, which allows both air conditioning as well as heating.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Again, we're headed towards the goal of silver certification, I believe, from the LEED perspective. And so I know we'll be looking at all different types of heating and cooling that are most efficient. Next question also for you, Mr. Knoll, had to do with louvers. The question was raised by a resident regarding interior or exterior. If you can just comment on those.
Would use both, I think. Interior is good for controlling glare if the light is coming in, so there are uses for both of them. Exterior louvers are good because they prevent the light from actually hitting the glass. Once the light comes through the glass and you control it with an interior louver, you still have some heat gain, but it's better than nothing.
Okay, thank you. And just to finish up, I mentioned the RDA funds that are going to be used for this library. There's also an organization in this town, wonderful group of people called Friends of the Library. They have taken it upon themselves to help with this project as far as fixturizing, which I understand to be tables, lamps, pictures, whatever. Fixturizing, I think, is a good word. And their goal, I believe, last I heard, is to raise up to $2 million to go towards enhancing and improving our library. And if I may ask, perhaps of Rita there in the audience, what is the contact or website for anybody watching on TV tonight or any of our reporters that want to include that in their article? For a contact for Friends of the Library, for anyone who wants to help in the fundraising efforts.
Well, they can call the Friends message line, which is...
I'll repeat this in just a minute so you can hear it. Go ahead.
Around 397-9700, and that message line is answered the next business day.
Thank you, Rita. Okay, the number you want to call is 397-9700 if you want to help out with this community library project. Okay, that answers the responses to the community questions. I'm now going to turn to council for questions of staff and specifically our architect regarding what you've seen tonight. What we are charged with tonight is the conceptual design, feedback on the conceptual design that you've seen before us tonight, and then we'll go on to Part B, which is amending the agreement. But really what we're here for and what the public is here for is to hear from us, and we need our architects to hear from us, council, to give them direction on the conceptual design so they know how to proceed. I'm opening it up, looking to fellow council members. Councilman Krasinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question for you, Mr. Tam. First of all, this probably does address Mr. Davis's comments about the appropriateness of the architecture for the town. Even though there are many Victorian and craftsman-style examples of residences and structures in the town, this is not a town with only that architectural or those architectural formats, and that the heterogeneous nature of the architecture in the town adds to the fabric of the community, and I think it has always increased and benefited us throughout the history of the town. So we have no one architecture that is Los Gatos architecture. You have to keep that in mind clearly. Secondly, I think when the council a number of years back was faced with the question of the Civic Center in relationship to a new library, the existing Civic Center, the council decided at that time, even though there was a member on the council who recommended that perhaps the whole Civic Center be demoed because it didn't fit the architecture of the town, that was not the majority position. The majority position was we have to be fiscally appropriate, and that the architecture of the Civic Center does actually communicate a certain orientation toward emphasis on the green spaces, and lets the Civic Center kind of shrink in impact so that it's not in your face. And I think that the design that was captured back in the 60s serves us well to date. And because of that, I believe that your architectural orientation very definitely does meet the congruence of the current structures. My question to you is this: is there anything other than, from your perspective, anything other than the geometry of the buildings, or the building that you're envisioning, that links it to the architecture of the rest of the Civic Center, Neighborhood Center, and the Civic Center itself? And what is the role of materials in that linkage? Because the materials you presented are materials that don't imitate the basic materials of the current structure. And so that's the question I'd like you to address is, if we were to go to other materials, as the samples have been brought forward, what is the risk, what is the benefit, and how is it that we can continue to see this as an architecturally congruent campus, given those constraints?
That's a tricky design question. I think, what we were trying to do in terms of relating to it was the form, which was sort of, rectangular forms, and then finding sort of materials that went well with the color and the texture of the brick and the concrete. And that's why we sort of are looking at terracotta and possibly natural stone, depending on the color. I think that if you sort of start looking at other materials, I think it is possible to still feel like you're in relationship to it. It would really sort of depend upon a design exercise and looking at it fairly closely. We also have that large, beautiful hillside that rises up behind it with the trees and the vegetation and some of the other features that are back there that you could, consider that you're relating to sort of natural features of the site as well, even if you sort of turned away so that the existing brick buildings could kind of be, framed or sort of have the library at the center and something slightly different but still relating to it. Does that kind of respond to your question?
If I might, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it does, and that's something I'm going to be very conscious of as we move into more explicit design elements, that I want to see how the artistry that you're proposing actually allows us to evolve the Civic Center rather than intrude on the Civic Center. And so I know there's going to be a lot more discussion of this, and I know we're going to dig much deeper beyond this current issue, but that would be very significant to me. As far as the 5 offerings, my preference is number 1, and it's because it seems to embody all of those characteristics that you discovered when you did the community outreach, particularly the fact that it's open. It's driven by the concept of light both emanating and the reflection of the people on the inside who are participating in the library experience. I like the idea of the teen bulb out, or pop out rather, on the front of the building, the focus on the children's section of the library right in the front. I think that there's so many elements you've put in there that really do match each of the characteristics that were asked of you by the community. So that would be my preference at this time.
Thank you. Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to first put this in context before I ask my question. I liked what you said in your presentation about making the library compatible with, but not identical to, the existing structures. And I do recognize the fact that even though we have some marvelous, diverse architecture in Los Gatos, and I too live in a Victorian home, that the campus here at the town is indeed low rectangular structures. That being said, I can understand why you're going where you're going, but I also had anticipated that the materials for the new library would include, in part, the brick, or at least some of the brick that we have here, in order to tie one structure to the other. So the question would be, you don't appear to be heading in that direction, and why not?
I think a couple of reasons, I think. I think if we used brick that exactly matched this brick here, we were sort of hesitant to do that because we felt we would be mimicking it. And we thought we would play on that. We like the color of the brick, and I love the way the brick is used on the building, and it's a very sort of modern expression and use of the brick, and it's a very nice brick as well. But we were sort of shying away from that, trying to play off of that with some different module and a different pattern that still felt compatible. I mean, in many ways, our building is the opposite of the Civic Center in as much as we're transparent and the Civic Center is very solid, and we're sort of reversing that. And I think playing off on sort of those differences between them was something that we felt was sort of interest to us from a design point of view, and also would sort of take us away from being too close. I mean, we also aren't proposing so much to be using concrete either. I mean, the exposed concrete in this building is a very distinctive feature of it. we're sort of shied away a little bit from that. There'll be plenty of concrete on the paving, but on the face of the building, we sort of kept away from that. Oh, and for the record, I live in a Victorian, too.
There you go.
All right. Well,
Follow up, Mr. Spector?
Yes. I like, of your 5 presentations, I like number 1 also. Specifically, I like the overhang. I love the glass. It's what I had anticipated along the north side. I like the fact that you have the glass. I like the large within it. I like the large spaces. I like the fact that the large spaces are made more intimate by the gathering or groupings within it. I like the light that you're anticipating using. I personally prefer the golden or white light or whatever you call it as an architect. It would be a step for me to use colored light, maybe to add a little bit of jazz and coolness for the children or the teenagers. I'd have to keep an open mind, but I personally like the light, golden light. I like the sustainable education. I like what you call the express structures. And I would just have you consider, I can understand not wanting to imitate these bricks. I really can. But maybe work them in somewhere rather than not have them there at all.
Thank you. And before I go to Councilmember Rice, Mr. Knoll, bottom left on that table, that piece that looks to be maybe 5 by 12, 4 by 12 right there, isn't that a possibility as far as an exterior type siding as I look at option number 1, where you sketch out what could be interpreted as concrete blocks or in fact bricks? Isn't something like that a possibility?
Absolutely. This is a product made up near Sacramento by Gladys McBean, which is started, I think, during the gold rush days, making terracotta from the
Okay, and we don't have you on the mic right now, so I can't continue much more of the dialogue. But what my point was, because I've heard the brick and the tie-in and the brick and the tie-in raised here twice, and we still have 3 more to go, that right there is a possibility to consider in using where it shows what appears to be concrete blocks or bricks, for instance, to the left of the entrance on option number 1 right behind me. And if it were red or something, that's an option that might in some way tie in. Okay, thank you. Now turn to Councilmember Rice. Your question.
And I don't live in a Victorian, so sorry.
Okay, no question in for you.
No.
Now we'll turn.
My first.
Go ahead.
At first, I was drawn to option 2 with the thought of tying in the more solid spaces to the existing civic center, but what you just suggested, Mayor, of to the left of the entrance, I like that a lot as well, and I love the light idea with option 1, and that really was my preference to begin with. The question I have is all of the slides or all the pictures that you showed of the large spaces are very inviting, but they're also very tall. What are we looking at on a height for the building here, roughly?
38? About 32 feet, or possibly more. We're looking for, the ground floor would be about a 14-foot floor-to-floor height, and it's up about 2 feet from the parking level now, and that gives us room for sort of ceilings and things like that. And then the upper floor would be probably about 16 feet, a really pretty tall space. The reason is, partly to sort of have a grand, reading room kind of feel to it, but also the taller it is, the better you can bring the natural light in, the further you can throw it in. And so when you look at those sections of the building, we have the windows on the outside would bring light in a certain distance, and then the monitor in the middle will fill that in. So at pretty much all parts of the building will have pretty ample natural light. So this light will come in that far, and this light will fill it in. So we'll have a lighting control system in this building that automatically dims the light depending on how much natural daylight is available. It saves a lot of energy and leaves, natural light is the best quality of light there is.
Absolutely.
Please, go ahead.
And my understanding is this will go through the normal planning process for the town as well, right? Thank you.
Thank you. And just to follow up based on the slide you have up there before I turn to Vice Mayor McNutt for her comments and questions, at the top of that, it looks like a little pop-up. I believe in discussions we've had previously, the idea there perhaps is to have some glass around the perimeter of that roof, which would let the light come in as it comes up from the east side, comes around the south, sets over in the west. and so gives light, natural light, coming in at different angles during the day. Is that correct?
Sort of. It would have glass on the south side and on the north side. On the south side, we would have louvers or an overhang to control it so that the direct light didn't come in. So we generally try to avoid the light coming directly into the building, and so we would avoid it on the east and west ends of that, because you can't control that, and it creates glare. And you ever sat at a desk with a beam of light hitting it, it's pretty hard to read.
Makes sense. And the 32 feet that you just responded to, Councilmember Rice, are you talking about the top of the pop-up?
Talking about right there. So the pop-up would be beyond, but the angles are such that you'd have to be pretty much out across Main Street to even see that pop-up.
Gotcha.
And we're going to design that a little more carefully.
Good, thank you. Vice Mayor McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of comments that haven't already been mentioned. In terms of compatibility with the Civic Center, what's important for me is to remember that we refer to the Civic Center many times as just this building that we're in, whereas you can also view it as the entire campus. And I think this building has an opportunity to tie together all of the elements of the campus. So this existing building that we are in, the neighborhood center, which looks quite different actually, in my view, from this building, and Pageant Park, which is hidden away and underutilized. So I really like the direction that you're going in, where maybe there's something that looks like bricks, or maybe there is actually bricks, or maybe there are brick on the walkway to kind of do that transition from one building to another. But I think the library has to unify all of these pieces together and not just this particular one that we're sitting in today. And that's why when I look at all those materials, the ones that I am drawn to the most are the ones that are inviting, that are touchable, and that represent some aspect of nature. And I hope that the public has a chance to come up afterwards and really look at the detail in some of those, because they're so creative and unusual. And I think they are just going to, if we're able to incorporate many of those, it's just really going to push up Pageant grounds in a way that's never been before, and add some warmth and invitability to the Civic Center that I think that we've been lacking. We have that beautiful lawn out front, and then it kind of gets colder and colder as you go into the building. So I think you have a big task ahead of you, but I really like the direction that you're headed in. I also am partial to number one. If we can afford that much glass, I think that would be wonderful. I do know that our number one priority is staying within our budget, which is, as the mayor said, around $18.5 million. We'd be happy to spend much more if somebody would like to donate some additional funds to us. So anyone who wants to cut a check for a few million so we can really do this in a glamorous way. But if we can afford to have that much glass, I think that will fulfill all of the criteria that you've set out that we're trying to accomplish. And I also, as I think Mr. Przinski mentioned, really like the idea of the pop-out for the teens. I think that would make it a real cool place to be seen inside and out, and I think it's always a good idea if you can entice teens into libraries.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Mr. Przinski.
One quick comment. I want to reinforce something that Rita Baum said, and her focus was that she's been to an awful lot of libraries, and they're extraordinary architectural presentations, but because of the use of concrete or other materials, they're cold and uninviting. And the first guiding principle for the new library is indicated as warm and inviting. And I think that I'd like to just kind of reemphasize that. I think all the materials that you've given us are a reflection of warm and inviting. And that's, obviously you've got the theme. And how that gets translated into the structure itself, I think, is going to be extremely important. For our purposes, I'm sure we're in sync on this, that it's extremely significant to us that this be a place of warmth, light, welcome, and that all the materials are reflective of those issues and emotions, and we encourage you to move forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Spector.
Just one last comment, and I know that you and your reputation for being sensitive to the environment know this, but when we talk about the added expense for the north-facing windows, I'm also sensitive to the fact that we balance that with the energy savings of having the light coming in through the north side. Now, of course, the budget for the library doesn't get, reduced by the fact that we have energy saving in the year 2012, but that is an issue.
Thank you, and I'll culminate our discussion here right now, Mr. Knoll, with my comments. I, too, prefer option number 1, so that makes it unanimous. So I think tonight has been a success from your standpoint, because we want basically the front of the library to look like. There's been discussions about the side, but I think that's a momentous moment, frankly, is to see the desire to have that glass in the front so it's transparent looking in and looking out, to have that pop-out feature for the teens. That's a wonderful thing. So I'm excited for all of us, for the whole community, and the fact that we kind of have an outside design picked out for you to continue working on. I know it's taken a lot of work to get to this point. For myself, as far as the south side goes, louvered to manage the sun, and I think that's been discussed and agreed upon. That's the direction that you're going, being that that's the sunny side. Option number 1 is my choice, as well as the rest of the council, for the front elevation with glass on both sides with a pop-out area for the teens. Going back to what was practically your opening statement, I think you heard from each of the council members in a different way, is that the Los Gatos Library be warm and inviting. And that's from the outside, and then once they get inside, it's got to feel warm and inviting. I think tying into Vice Mayor McNutt's comments, and we're going to adjourn very shortly, and I encourage you to come up and look at these samples that are up here. But there's some very interesting, unique, natural, nature-type pieces that are up here that I've never seen before, and I'll be interested to see as we progress through this process how you select various pieces and parts to match with walls and floors and things like that to work together. You heard from this council, let's see, number 1 all the way around, use of brick in there somewhere, and I think as you look at the diagram on number 1, you certainly have areas where brick opportunities present themselves as realistic options. And last that I have, and there's a conversation we had before on your slide right there, the darker tan trees, I believe we were calling new trees or potential additions, and it's those 3, you're hitting them, the bottom 3 right there, that I would suggest in whatever you bring forward to us are not included, simply so they don't take up more of the current lawn space that is currently used by Fiesta de Arts and Music in the Park. So we want to make sure that we don't take away any of that front usable lawn area now that we fill 10 weeks every summer with Music in the Park and 1 weekend every summer with Fiesta de Arts. And council, Mrs. Conway.
If I could just say a word, I really resonated with Mrs. Quintana's remarks, and I know that she is a library user, and she asked if there would be a quiet space. And, society has changed since the days of the Victorian libraries, where it was always quiet in every corner. That's not true anymore, no matter where you go. But yes, indeed, there will be a quiet room, and it will be very quiet. And then there will be a noisy room. And that's a concept that libraries are using now. And not that it would be uproariously noisy, but it would be where people, and probably a lot of the teens, where they could do group study, where you could have a small meeting, where you could work on projects. The kids, as I call the teens, love to work together. They love to work in a circle, and even they could be a little noisier in there than they could even in the teen center, is kind of the idea, and that has worked in a number of libraries. And so it's really zoning the noise level. And I also liked what Nolandham has done as far as the second floor, which is adult services, that the less quiet activities, the teen center, the technology, the noisy study room, the copy area, the bathrooms, the media section are all on one side. And then on the other side, it should be a much quieter environment, and that's the history room, reference, nonfiction, the quiet study room. And in the meantime, the children are on the first floor, which, as much as we love them, they are kind of noisy. So I think the zoning has great promise, and that's something that, you want the library, yes, to be warm and inviting, but you don't want to go in there and want to sit down and read and have it be too noisy for you to enjoy it. So that's a very important concept, and I'm happy with the way that Nolandham is working with us on that.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 2 that we have has two parts, an A and a B. Part A is to discuss and provide input on draft conceptual design for the new library. I believe we've done that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that there's any motion required. We've given that direction for item A, and we'll move on to B now. Is that correct? I'm getting the nods from staff. I've got a question from Councilmember Spector.
Ready to make a motion?
Okay, we'll now look to, I've already been asked already to make that motion, so it doesn't matter. I will turn to Councilmember Spector for the motion regarding item B.
Authorize the town manager to execute the First Amendment to agreement with Nolandham to extend the term of the agreement to June 30th, 2009.
Second.
Motion is made by Councilmember Spector. It is seconded by Vice Mayor McNutt. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Good. Nobody. Passes unanimously. That completes tonight's agenda. Meeting adjourned.